Welcome to Cozy Classic Story Hour on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair, where my friends and I read you some classic tales to curl up to. Please note that the views expressed in these stories are not the views of myself or WMSC. Tonight's stories are The 12 Brothers, The Pack of Ragamuffins, and Cinderella, all by the Brothers Grimm. Now grab a blanket, get comfortable, and let's begin. The 12 Brothers. There were once on a time a king and a queen who lived happily together and had 12 children, but they were all boys. Then said the king to his wife, "If the 13th child which thou art about to bring into the world is a girl, the 12 boys shall die, in order that her possessions may be great, and that the kingdom may fall to her alone." He called likewise 12 coffins to be made, which were already filled with shavings, and in each lay the little pillow for the dead, and he had them taken into a locked-up room, and then he gave the queen the key of it, and bade her not to speak of this to anyone. The mother, however, now sat and lamented all day long, until the youngest son, who was always with her, and whom she had named Benjamin from the Bible, said to her, "Dear mother, why art thou so sad?" "Dearest child," she answered, "I may not tell thee." But he let her have no rest until she went and unlocked the room, and showed him the 12 coffins ready filled with shavings. Then she said, "My dearest Benjamin, thy father has had these coffins made for thee and for thy 11 brothers, for if I bring a little girl into the world, you are all to be killed and buried in them." And as she wept while she was saying this, the son comforted her, and said, "Weep not, dear mother, we will save ourselves and go hence." But she said, "Go forth into the forest with thy 11 brothers, and let one sit constantly on the highest tree which can be found, and keep watch, looking towards the tower here in the castle. If I give birth to a little son, I will put up a white flag, and then you may venture to come back. But if I bear a daughter, I will hoist a red flag, and then fly hence as quickly as you are able, and may the good God protect you. And every night I will rise up and pray for you, in winter that you may be able to warm yourself at a fire, and in summer that you may not faint away in the heat." After she had blessed her sons, therefore, they went forth into the forest. They each kept watch in turn, and sat on the highest oak and looked towards the tower. When 11 days had passed and the turn came to Benjamin, he saw that a flag was being raised. It was, however, not the white, but the blood-red flag which announced that they were all to die. When the brothers heard that, they were very angry and said, "Are we all to suffer death for the sake of a girl? We swear that we will avenge ourselves. Wheresoever we find a girl, her red blood shall flow." Thereupon they went deeper into the forest, and in the midst of it, where it was the darkest, they found a little bewitched hut, which was standing empty. Then said they, "Here we will dwell, and thou, Benjamin, who art the youngest and weakest, thou shalt stay at home and keep house. We others will go out and get food." Then they went into the forest and shot hares, wild deer, birds, and pigeons, and whatsoever there was to eat. This they took to Benjamin, who had to dress it for them in order that they might appease their hunger. They lived together 10 years in the little hut, and the time did not appear long to them. The little daughter which their mother the queen had given birth to was now grown up. She was good of heart and fair of face, and had a golden star on her forehead. Once, when it was the great washing, she saw 12 men's shirts among the things, and asked her mother,
"To whom do these 12 shirts belong? For they are far too small for father."
Then the queen answered with a heavy heart, "Dear child, these belong to thy 12 brothers." Said the maiden,
"Where are my 12 brothers? I have never yet heard of them."
She replied, "God knows where they are. They are wandering about the world." Then she took the maiden and opened the chamber for her, and showed her the 12 coffins with the shavings and pillows for the head. "These coffins," said she, "were destined for thy brothers. but they went away secretly before thou wert born." And she related to her how everything had happened. Then said the maiden,
"Dear mother, weep not. I will go and seek my brothers."
So she took the 12 shirts and went forth, and straight into the great forest. She walked the whole day, and in the evening she came to the bewitched hut. Then she entered it, and found a young boy, who asked, "From whence comest thou, and whither art thou bound?" and was astonished that she was so beautiful, and wore royal garments, and had a star on her forehead. And she answered,
"I am a king's daughter, and I am seeking my 12 brothers, and I will walk as far as the sky is blue until I find them."
She likewise showed him the 12 shirts which belonged to them. Then Benjamin saw that she was his sister, and said, "I am Benjamin, thy youngest brother." And she began to weep for joy, and Benjamin wept also, and they kissed and embraced each other with the greatest love. But after this he said, "Dear sister, there is still one difficulty. We have agreed that every maiden whom we meet shall die, because we are obliged to leave our kingdom on account of a girl." Then said she,
"I will willingly die, if by so doing I can deliver my 12 brothers."
"No," answered he, "thou shalt not die. Seat thyself beneath his tub until our 11 brothers come, and then I will soon come to an agreement with them." She did so, and when it was night, the others came from hunting, and their dinner was ready. And as they were sitting at table and eating, they asked, "What news is there?" Said Benjamin, "Don't you know anything?" "No," they answered. He continued, "You have been in the forest, and I have stayed at home, and yet I know more than you do." "Tell us, then," they cried. He answered, "But promise me that the first maiden who meets us shall not be killed." "Yes," they all cried, "she shall have mercy, only do tell us." Then said he, "Our sister is here." And he lifted up the tub, and the king's daughter came forth in her royal garments with the golden star on her forehead. And she was beautiful, delicate, and fair. Then they were all rejoiced, and fell on her neck, and kissed and loved her with all their hearts. Now she stayed at home with Benjamin, and helped him with the work. The 11 went into the forest and caught game, and deer, and birds, and wood pigeons, that they might have food. And the little sister and Benjamin took care to make it ready for them. She sought for the wood for cooking and herbs for vegetables, and put the pans on the fire so that the dinner was always ready when the 11 came. She likewise kept order in the little house, and put beautiful white clean coverings on the little beds, and the brothers were always contented and lived in great harmony with her. Once on a time, the 2 at home had prepared a beautiful entertainment, and when they were all together, they sat down and ate and drank and were full of gladness. There was, however, a little garden belonging to the bewitched house wherein stood 12 lily flowers, which are likewise called students. She wished to give her brothers pleasure, and plucked the 12 flowers, and thought she would present each brother with one while at dinner. But at the self-same moment that she plucked the flowers, the 12 brothers were changed into 12 ravens, and flew away over the forest, and the house and garden vanished likewise. And now the poor maiden was alone in the wild forest, and when she looked around, an old woman was standing near her, who said, "My child, what hast thou done? Why didst thou not leave the 12 white flowers growing? They were thy brothers, who are now for evermore changed into ravens." The maiden said, weeping,
"Is there no way of delivering them?"
"No," said the woman. "There is but one in the whole world, and that is so hard that thou wilt not deliver them by it, for thou must be mute for 7 years, and mayst not speak or laugh. And if thou speakest one single word, and only an hour of the 7 years is wanting, all is in vain, and thy brothers will be killed by the one word." Then said the maiden in her heart,
"I know with certainty that I shall set my brothers free,"
and went and sought a high tree, and seated herself in it and span, and neither spoke nor laughed. Now it so happened that a king was hunting in the forest, who had a great greyhound which ran to the tree on which the maiden was sitting, and sprang about it, whining and barking at her. Then the king came by and saw the beautiful king's daughter with the golden star on her brow, and was so charmed with her beauty that he called to ask her if she would be his wife. She made no answer, but nodded a little with her head. So he climbed up the tree himself, carried her down, placed her on his horse, and bore her home. Then the wedding was solemnized with great magnificence and rejoicing, but the bride neither spoke nor smiled. When they had lived happily together for a few years, the king's mother, who was a wicked woman, began to slander the young queen, and said to the king, "This is a common beggar girl, whom thou hast brought back with thee. Who knows what ominous tricks she practices secretly? Even if she be mute and not able to speak, she still might laugh for once. But those who do not laugh have bad consciences." At first, the king would not believe it, but the old woman urged this so long and accused her of so many things that at last the king let himself be persuaded and sentenced her to death. And now a great fire was lighted in the courtyard in which she was to be burnt, and the king stood above at the window and looked on with tearful eyes, because he still loved her so much. And when she was bound fast to the stake, and the fire was licking at her clothes with its red tongue, the last instant of the 7 years expired. Then a whirring sound was heard in the air, and 12 ravens came flying towards the place and sank downwards, and when they touched the earth, they were her 12 brothers, who she had delivered. They tore the fire asunder, extinguished the flames, set their dear sister free, and kissed and embraced her. And now, as she dared to open her mouth and speak, she told the king why she had been mute and had never laughed. The king rejoiced when he heard that she was innocent, and they all lived in great unity until their death. The wicked stepmother was taken before the judge and put into a barrel filled with boiling oil and venomous snakes, and died an evil death. The end. The Pack of Ragamuffins. The rooster once said to the hen,
"It is now the time when our nuts are ripe. Let us go to the hill together, and for once eat our fill before the squirrel takes them all away."
"Yes," replied the hen. "Come, we will have some pleasure together." Then they went away to the hill, and on it was a bright day. They stayed till evening. Now, I do not know whether it was that they had eaten till they were too fat, or whether they had become proud, but they would not go home on foot, and the rooster had to build a little carriage of nutshells. When it was ready, the little hen seated herself in it and said to the rooster, "Thou canst just harness thyself to it."
"I like that,"
said the rooster.
"I would rather go home on foot than let myself be harnessed to it. No, that is not our bargain. I do not mind being coachman and sitting on the box, but drag it myself I will not."
As they were thus disputing, a duck quacked to them. "You thieving folks, who bade you go to my nut hill? Well, you shall suffer for it," and ran with open beak at the rooster. But the rooster was also not idle, and fell boldly on the duck, and at last wounded her so with his spurs that she also begged for mercy, and willingly let herself be harnessed to the carriage as a punishment. The little rooster now seated himself on the box and coachman, and thereupon they went off in a gallop with,
"Duck, go as fast as thou canst."
When they had driven a part of the way, they met 2 foot passengers, a pin and a needle. They cried,
"Stop! Stop!"
and said that it would soon be as dark as pitch, and then they could not go a step further, and that it was so dirty on the road, and asked if they could not get into the carriage for a while. They had been at the tailor's public house by the gate, and had stayed too long over the beer. As they were thin people, who did not take up much room, the rooster let them both get in, but they had to promise him and his little hen not to step on their feet. Late in the evening they came to an inn, and as they did not like to go further by night, and as the duck also was not strong on her feet, and fell from one side to the other, they went in. The host at first made many objections. His house was already full. Besides, he thought they could not be very distinguished persons. But at last, as they made pleasant speeches, and told him that he should have the egg which the little hen has laid on the way, and should likewise keep the duck, which laid one every day, he at length said that they might stay the night. And now they had themselves well served, and feasted and rioted. Early in the morning, when day was breaking, and everyone was asleep, the rooster awoke the hen, brought the egg, pecked it open, and they ate it together, but they threw the shell on the hearth. Then they went to the needle, which was still asleep, took it by the head and stuck it into the cushion of the landlord's chair, and put the pin in his towel, and at the last, without more ado, They flew away over the heath. The duck, who liked to sleep in the open air and had stayed in the yard, heard them going away, made herself merry, and found a stream, down which she swam, which was a much quicker way of traveling than being harnessed to a carriage. The host did not get out of bed for 2 hours after this. He washed himself and wanted to dry himself. Then the pin went over his face and made a red streak from one ear to the other. After this, he went into the kitchen and wanted to light a pipe, but when he came to the hearth, the eggshell darted into his eyes. "This morning everything attacks my head," said he, and angrily sat down on his grandfather's chair. But he quickly started up again and cried, "Woe is me!" For the needle had pricked him still worse than the pin, and not in the head. Now he was thoroughly angry, and suspected the guests who had come so late the night before, and when he went and looked about for them, they were gone. Then he made a vow to take no more ragamuffins into his house, for they consume much, pay for nothing, and play mischievous tricks into the bargain by way of gratitude. The end. Cinderella. The wife of a rich man fell sick, and as she felt that her end was drawing near, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "Dear child, be good and pious, and then the good God will always protect thee, and I will look down on thee from heaven and be near thee." Thereupon she closed her eyes and departed. Every day the maiden went out to her mother's grave and wept, and she remained pious and good. When winter came, the snow spread a white sheet over the grave, and when the spring sun had drawn it off again, the man had taken another wife. The woman had brought 2 daughters into the house with her, who were beautiful and fair of face, but vile and black of heart. Now began a bad time for the poor stepchild. "Is the stupid goose to sit in the parlor with us?" said they. "He who wants to eat bread must earn it. Out with the kitchen wench." They took her pretty clothes away from her, and put an old gray bedgown on her, and gave her wooden shoes. "Just look at the proud princess, how decked out she is!" They cried and laughed, and led her into the kitchen. There she had to do hard work from morning till night, get up before daybreak, carry water, light fires, cook and wash. Besides this, the sisters did her every imaginable injury. They mocked her, and emptied her peas and lentils into the ashes, so that she was forced to sit and pick them out again. In the evening, when she had worked till she was weary, she had no bed to go to, but had to sleep by the fireside in the ashes. And as on that account she always looked dusty and dirty, they called her Cinderella. It happened that the father was once going to the fair, and he asked his 2 stepdaughters what he should bring back for them. "Beautiful dresses," said one. "Pearls and jewels," said the second. "And thou, Cinderella," said he, "what wilt thou have?"
"Father, break off from me the first branch which knocks against your hat on your way home."
So he bought beautiful dresses, pearls, and jewels for his 2 stepdaughters. And on his way home, as he was riding through a green thicket, a hazel twig brushed against him and knocked off his hat. Then he broke off the branch and took it with him. When he reached home, he gave his stepdaughters the things which they had wished for, and to Cinderella he gave the branch from the hazel bush. Cinderella thanked him, went to her mother's grave, and planted the branch on it, and wept so much that the tears fell down on it and watered it. And it grew, however, and became a handsome tree. Thrice a day Cinderella went and sat beneath it, and wept and prayed, and a little white bird always came on the tree, and if Cinderella expressed a wish, the bird threw down to her what she had wished for. It happened, however, that the king appointed a festival which was to last 3 days, and to which all the beautiful young girls in the country were invited, in order that his son might choose himself a bride. When the 2 stepsisters heard that they were to appear among the number, they were delighted, called Cinderella, and said, "Comb our hair for us, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles, for we are going to the festival at the king's palace." Cinderella obeyed, but wept, because she too would have liked to go with them to the dance, and begged her stepmother to allow her to do so. "Thou go, Cinderella," said she. "Thou art dusty and dirty, and wouldst go to the festival? Thou hast no clothes and shoes, and yet wouldst dance." As, however, Cinderella went on asking, the stepmother at last said, "I have emptied a pile of lentils into the ashes for thee. If thou hast picked them out again in 2 hours, thou shalt go with us." The maiden went through the back door into the garden, and called,
You tame pigeons, you turtle doves, and all you birds beneath the sky, come and help me to pick the good into the pot, the bad into the crop.
Then 2 white pigeons came in by the kitchen window, and afterwards the turtle doves, and at last all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and crowding in and alighted amongst the ashes. And the pigeons nodded with their heads and began pick, 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 and the rest began also pick, 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 and gathered all the good grains into the dish. Hardly had 1 hour passed before they had finished, and all flew out again. Then the girl took the dish to her stepmother, and was glad, and believed that now she would be allowed to go with them to the festival. But the stepmother said, "No, Cinderella, thou hast no clothes, and thou canst not dance. Thou wouldst only be laughed at." And as Cinderella wept at this, the stepmother said, "If thou canst pick 2 dishes of lentils out of the ashes for me in 1 hour, thou shalt go with us." And she thought to herself, that she most certainly cannot do. When the stepmother had emptied the 2 dishes of lentils amongst the ashes, the maiden went through the back door into the garden and cried,
You tame pigeons, you turtle doves, and all you birds under heaven, come and help me to pick the good into the pot, the bad into the crop.
Then 2 white pigeons came in by the kitchen window, and afterwards the turtle doves, and at length all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and crowding in and alighted among the ashes. And the doves nodded with their heads and began pick, 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 and the others began also pick, 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 and gathered all the good seeds into the dishes. And before half an hour was over, they had already finished, and all flew out again. Then the maiden carried the dishes to the stepmother, and was delighted, and believed that she might now go with them to the festival. But the stepmother said, "All this will not help thee. Thou goest not with us, for thou hast no clothes, and canst not dance. We should be ashamed of thee." On this side she turned her back on Cinderella, and hurried away with her 2 proud daughters. As no one was now at home, Cinderella went to her mother's grace beneath the hazel tree, and cried,
Shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold throw down over me.
Then the bird threw a gold and silver dress down to her, and slippers embroidered with silk and silver. She put on the dress with all speed, and went to the festival. Her stepsisters and the stepmother, however, did not know her, and thought she must be a foreign princess, for she looked so beautiful in the golden dress. They never once thought of Cinderella, and believed that she was sitting at home in the dirt, picking lentils out of the ashes. The prince went to meet her, took her by the hand, and danced with her. He would dance with no other maiden, and never left loose of her hand, and if anyone else came to invite her, he said, "This is my partner." She danced till it was evening, and then she wanted to go home, but the king's son said, "I will go with thee, and bear thee company," for he wished to see to whom the beautiful maiden belonged. She escaped from him, however, and sprang into the pigeon house. The king's son waited until her father came, and then he told him that the stranger maiden had leapt into the pigeon house. The old man thought, "Can it be Cinderella?" And they had to bring him an axe and a pickaxe, that he might hew the pigeon house to pieces, but no one was inside it. And when they got home, Cinderella lay in her dirty clothes among the ashes, and a dim little oil lamp was burning on the mantelpiece, for Cinderella had jumped quickly down from the back of the pigeon house and had run to the little hazel tree, and there she had taken off her beautiful clothes and laid them on the grave, and the bird had taken them away again. And then she placed herself in the kitchen amongst the ashes in her grey gown. Next day, when the festival began afresh, and her parents and the stepsisters had gone once more, Cinderella went to the hazel tree and said,
Shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold throw down over me.
Then the bird threw down a much more beautiful dress than on the preceding day, and when Cinderella appeared at the festival in this dress, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The king's son had waited until she came, and instantly took her by the hand and danced with no one but her. When others came and invited her, he said, "She is my partner." When evening came, she wished to leave, and the king's son followed her and wanted to see into which house she went. But she sprang away from him, and into the garden behind the house. Therein stood a beautiful tall tree on which hung the most magnificent pears. She clambered so nimbly between the branches like a squirrel that the king's son did not know where she was gone. He waited until her father came, and said to him, "The stranger maiden has escaped from me, and I believe she has climbed up the pear tree." The father thought, "Can it be Cinderella?" and had an axe brought and cut the tree down, but no one was on it. And when they got into the kitchen, Cinderella lay there amongst the ashes, as usual, for she had jumped down on the other side of the tree, had taken the beautiful dress to the bird on the little hazel tree, and put on her grey gown. On the third day, when the parents and sisters had gone away, Cinderella went once more to her mother's grave, and said to the little tree,
"Shiver and quiver, my little tree. Silver and gold throw down on me."
And now the bird threw down to her a dress, which was more splendid and magnificent than any she had yet had, and the slippers were golden. And when she went to the festival in the dress, no one knew how to speak for astonishment. The king's son danced with her only, and if anyone invited her to dance, he said, "She is my partner." When evening came, Cinderella wished to leave, and the king's son was anxious to go with her, but she escaped from him so quickly that he could not follow her. The king's son had, however, used a stratagem, and had caused the whole staircase to be smeared with pitch, and there, when she ran down, had the maiden's left slipper remained sticking. The king's son picked it up, and it was small and dainty and all golden. Next morning he went with it to the father, and said to him, "No one shall be my wife, but she whose foot this golden slipper fits." Then were the two sisters glad, for they had pretty feet. The eldest went with the shoe into her room, and wanted to try it on, and her mother stood by, but she could not get her big toe into it, and the shoe was too small for her. Then the mother gave her a knife, and said, "Cut the toe off. When thou art queen, thou wilt have no more need to go on foot." The maiden cut the toe off, forced the foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the king's son. Then he took her on his horse as his bride, and rode away with her. They were, however, obliged to pass the grave, and there on the hazel tree sat the two pigeons, and cried,
"Turn and peep! Turn and peep! There's blood within the shoe! The shoe, it is too small for her! The true bride waits for you!"
Then he looked at her foot, and saw how the blood was streaming from it. He turned his horse round and took the false bride home again, and said she was not the true one, and that the other sister was to put the shoe on. Then this one went into her chamber and got her toes safely into the shoe, but her heel was too large, so her mother gave her a knife, and said, "Cut a bit off of thy heel. When thou art queen, thou wilt have no more need to go on foot." The maiden cut off a bit of her heel, forced her foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the king's son. He took her on his horse as his bride, and rode away with her. But when they passed by the hazel tree, two little pigeons sat on it and cried, "Turn and peep! Turn and peep!"
"Turn and peep! Turn and peep! There's blood within the shoe! The shoe, it is too small for her! The true bride waits for you!"
He looked down at her foot, and saw how the blood was running out of her shoe, and how it had stained her white stocking. Then he turned his horse and took the false bride home again. "This is not the right one," said he. "Have you no other daughter?" "No," said the man. "There is still a little stunted kitchen wench which my late wife left behind her, but she cannot possibly be the bride." The king's son said he was to send her up to him, but the mother answered, "Oh, no, she is much too dirty. She cannot show herself." He absolutely insisted on it, and Cinderella had to be called. She first washed her hands and face clean, and then went and bowed down before the king's son, who gave her the golden shoe. Then she seated herself on a stool, drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe, and put it into the slipper, which fitted like a glove. And when she rose up and the king's son looked at her face, he recognized the beautiful maiden who had danced with him and cried, "That is the true bride!" The stepmother and the two sisters were terrified and became pale with rage. He, however, took Cinderella on his horse and rode away with her. As they passed by the hazel tree, the two white doves cried,
"Turn and peep! Turn and peep! No blood is in the shoe! The shoe is not too small for her! The true bride rides with you!"
And when they had cried that, the two came flying down and placed themselves on Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right, the other on the left, and remained sitting there. When the wedding with the king's son had to be celebrated, the two false sisters came and wanted to get into favor with Cinderella and share her good fortune. When the betrothed couple went to church, the elder was at the right side and the younger at the left, and the pigeons pecked out one eye of each of them. Afterwards, as they came back, The elder was at the left and the younger at the right, and then the pigeons pecked out the other eye of each. And thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. The end. Thank you for listening to Cozy Classics Story Hour. This episode was narrated by Joe Charlie Schweitzer, with additional voices provided by Natalia Artemis Kozlovsky. The rest of this hour will be songs related to the stories we read today. Next week, you can tune in to hear 3 more Brothers Grimm tales. Sleep well, and good night.